What's the cringiest way you've seen someone demonstrate a lack of self-awareness? Saw some lady at Costco throw a tantrum because the line was long. She kept screaming, "But I have a membership." You literally have to have a membership to shop there. The entire line had memberships. My Costco just put in self-checkouts and I've never been so excited. Knew a sister of the groom, also maid of honor, who pitched a violent fit because the bride was going to wear a tiara for the ceremony. Therefore, the sister couldn't. Literally screamed at both families, "I am the sister, for God's sake." Weddings bring out the worst in the worst people. My ex's younger sister was a pre-med student. Whenever we had family gatherings, she would monopolize the conversations, talking about her knowledge in chemistry and how she was going to become a surgeon one day. No one else could get a word in edgeways. One day, she brought her new BF to a Christmas party. I guess she wanted to leave a good impression on him. After having talked about herself for more than 1 hour non-stop, she suddenly stopped and said, "I hate talking about myself. I'd rather listen to others." She then asked her BF how he was doing in school, only to cut him off and start talking about herself for another hour. I'm a teacher and there's this one guy I work with who is not a teacher, but sometimes helps in our classrooms. Every time he helps, without fail, he'll tell us about some kid he made a great connection with, who he feels like he really got through to, only for that kid to complain about how annoying and fake he is the next day. Teens recognize respect realness over pretty much anything else. It's not just teens either. I work in daycare with 2.53-year-olds. One of my co-workers who works in the infant room will occasionally help out. She'll treat my toddlers like infants though, and they hate. Every time she helps I get a parent the next day asking who the infant lady is, because their kids hate her. My cousin's friend came over to stay for a few weeks. Very vain, and before she left, she wrote a note to my uncle, who is friendly to everyone, saying how she had to sadly reject him even though she knows how much he is secretly in love with her. But we all found the note together after she left, addressed to him. He was with us and opened in front of us. He was creeped out. A woman at my local coffee shop ordered a drink which was served in a paper to-go cup. She proceeded to berate the staff for not offering her a for-here mug and explained to them how horrible that was for the environment. She then demanded a mug and poured her coffee into the mug and threw away the to-go cup. Sounds about right. I have a friend who is basically a young Michael Scott. Seriously, sometimes when watching The Office I cringe, not because of what Michael is doing but because it reminds me so much of my friend. One day our group of friends gets on the topic of what Office character we're most like. He loudly and immediately declares he thinks he's most like Ryan. If Michael Scott watched The Office he'd think he was the most like Ryan as well, I think. A bad class roommate who no one wants to work with, and who I got stuck with last year, commented about how she keeps getting moved around because she's got so much experience. One of my current favorites is the stop and block the supermarket aisle and have a conversation duo. This tops the block the aisle with the cart while you browse oblivious adult. Reminds me of when people talk to each other from inside their cars idling in the middle of a neighborhood street. It's infuriating. My mother and I were out walking and we came across an older couple we knew from the local church. Their eldest son had died the previous year from an inoperable brain tumor and their younger son just moved out for university. Mum starts with, "Must be nice to have the house to yourself. More time for local church." Conversation devolves from there. She ignores all hints to drop the subject, including the mother stating they hadn't been back to the church since their son died. The couple were obviously horrified. I couldn't end the convo quick enough. Afterwards, my mother told me I was just being immature and had no conception of what polite adult conversation was like. I physically recoiled at this. I always feel like I don't know what to say when somebody has a loss like that, but must be nice to have the house to yourself has never crossed my mind as an option. Dude took multiple photos of the Declaration of Independence using flash photography, all while people yelled at him to stop. Other than the array of signs, you are advised multiple times to not use flash. They even have a special room to test if your camera is accidentally on flash. His response was just to listlessly stare at the workers and walk away. The sheer mixture of obliviousness and entitlement in his face made me momentarily lose faith in the idea of democracy while standing in the National Archive. I was working at Yellowstone National Park and someone asked me how we get the bears back into the cages every night. Had another person ask how we turned on Old Faithful in the morning. I told her we flush all the toilets in the park at the same time. A co-worker I had who thought I was Mexican. I am not, just ambiguously beige. And he asked if my people always put maize. Yes, he said maize, not corn, in salsa, and several other things about corn that I can't remember right now. He was really focused on Mexicans and corn. He also noticed a big necklace I was wearing once and asked me what significance it had in my culture. I told him I bought it at Target, so it just means that I like Target. LOL. He was reminded that I'm American several times. He just didn't get it for some reason. Oh, and the same co-worker also regaled a black co-worker with how he was the only white guy who could walk around the ghetto near where he lived at night because he had earned respect and they called him Holmes. Mind you, the cringy co-worker in both these stories is not only so white he glows, but he lived in a very nice area, and there was definitely no ghetto anywhere near his upscale condo development. I witnessed the second one in person, and it felt like it took a lifetime for me to pick my jaw up off the floor and make up some reason that cringy co-worker had to go see our manager in another building immediately. The cringe was so bad, it interrupted the time stream. Haha. Ambiguously beige, that got me. One woman, who is 40 and in great shape but absolutely desperate to be married, to another woman who is funny and sweet but overweight. I can't believe someone like you is married and I'm not. No lie, and it didn't even occur to her that it was insulting. She's too much of a narcissist to realize that. My mother is like this. She brings up how my friend's mom got another man to take care of her even though she's not that pretty and doesn't deserve it, like that's not how that works. I once told her about my friend's marriage and how I really look up to them and she goes, oh, he's cheating. No man would deal with her, my friend is blind. I was so infuriated. I have a friend who is extremely susceptible to pop psychology articles on the internet. If she's seen some article on her Facebook feed about being a hypersensitive person or an introverted extrovert, it'll be all you hear about for the next few weeks, and she'll give her unqualified self-diagnosis to anyone who will listen. She'll start accentuating those traits and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's especially irritating because in psychology it's pretty well known that psychological self-assessment is extremely invalid and that people are way worse at knowing themselves than they think. Had a similar experience with a co-worker who read an article and decided she was an empath, which means you have a heightened ability to perceive people's mental or emotional states. Easily the least self-aware person in the entire office. At one point she started yelling people for putting out bad vibes, which she is supposedly more susceptible to than non-empaths. Crazy bee. I don't know if this counts, but my mill was talking to this woman and asked her how far along she was. Pregnancy. She was not pregnant, but the lady took it in stride and was like, oh, I just haven't lost the baby weight from having my son. Mill replies, oh, how old is he? And she goes, he's 7. She put both feet in her mouth in about a 15-second window. My ex going off on a tirade about how her brother was irresponsible for not paying his cable bill that month. 2 days after she told me she wasn't going to be able to give me her half of the expenses for the 3rd month in a row. Was at a party. A guy was publicly putting down his girlfriend, saying loud crap such as like, you have any friends beside me? Then he joins my circle of conversation and starts doing Chris Rock bits like they were his original thoughts. I tried to give him an out, yeah, I heard that one. And he was like, what? It was as if he had a mental illness or was medicated. Host of the party eventually asked him to leave, told his girl she could stay. She stayed. I had a co-worker who is a bisexual woman. She argued up and down that bisexual men don't exist and need to just pick a side. I've known her to date both men and women for sure too. Bonus fun. Her response to a question about Valentine's Day gifts was, I don't need to give a gift. I brought the pee. I don't need to give a gift. I brought the pee. What an enchantress. Not super exciting, but I have a co-worker who talks trash on another co-worker all the time for having a long-term frick buddy. Meanwhile her, as she calls it, not boyfriend. Boyfriend is a 40-year-old man, 10 years older than her, who just moved out of his mom's house and won't commit to a relationship, but they frick, hang out, and are supposedly exclusive. What would you call that? Time to start talking to this trash talking co-worker about your other co-worker with the long-term FB, but just substitute the stories, changing the names and genders around if need be, and once they start laying into them, just stare and hope they're not dumb enough to not realize what happened. I saw a white woman at Taco Bell have a very loud, very condescending conversation with the guy behind the counter about how Taco Bell isn't authentic Mexican food. She obviously wanted the whole restaurant to hear, and obviously thought she was the only person at the restaurant, employees included, who was culturally aware enough to know this fact. She ended up storming out shouting, "Maybe if you guys had authentic Mexican food I'd eat here more." Oh, I should mention that the guy behind the counter was Mexican. I bet she went off to Olive Garden to get an authentic Italian experience. I do a workout camp with a group of people. I just started in January along with this other girl, Natalie. From our first workout, there was something about her that kinda rubbed me the wrong way. She struck me as the girl who would make the meeting last longer cause she won't shut up. A couple of weeks in, she missed her workout or two. Well, the following week, she was back. Camp was done. I had become friends with this woman, Susan. She and I were walking back to our mats, but I got ahead of her, and that's when Natalie, out of nowhere, accosts Susan. Literally what she says is, "Yeah, so, I was on my way to camp on Friday and I thought I had to fart, so I did, and I wound up crapping myself." All Susan could say was a shocked "Oh, no," because why the heck is she sharing this? But Natalie wasn't done yet, and I don't know if it was because of the smell or actually being sick, but I wound up throwing up too, so I had to drive home in my own diarrhea and vomit. Charles had to clean the car. It was awful. Susan said she was glad she was feeling better. Natalie left, and I asked Susan, "Did you do anything to welcome that?" Susan yelled no, and then we cackled because oh my god. Several months later, we're at camp. Natalie walks up to me, who is sitting on the ground, turns around and has her butt in my face and says, "Can you tell my pants are wet?" I said no. And that's when she told me she thought she could hold it but peed herself on her way there cause she sneezed, and then she says, "Well, if you smell something, it's probably me." Sweet god. Okay, this is hilarious. I was standing behind a guy and his girlfriend waiting to get into a comedy show about a week ago, and he was going on and on to another couple about how much he was a fan of ciders as the other couple was suggesting restaurants they try while visiting our town. This was strike one. Lo and behold, I get a table behind this dork and his girlfriend, and when the comic did some crowd work at the beginning of the show, he asked the crowd to try and think of something he, the comic, would not do for $1 million. Cider guy chimed in at the top of his lungs, "Suck a fart out of my butt." The comic didn't hear him, so he repeated it 2 more times. The room went silent. It was like something a 7-year-old would say. I cringed for a full 5 minutes. I used to be part of an improv group. Crude and immature audience suggestions are really common, although I don't think I ever heard anything quite that gross. Usually it was just stuff like dildo or strippers or gay pee. I have a very close and dear friend whom I adore with all my heart. She is intelligent, warm, funny and kind. Just an incredible human being. That being said, she has regular psychic readings. She will then live her life according to what the psychic has told her, so it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The reason I say psychic is because I've been to several of these with her. I'm interested and it can do no harm. She tells me she gives nothing away, but the first thing she does is tell them what she wants to know, why she wants to know it, how she's got to this point and what she'd like moving forward. I told them my name and got told my pet needed to go to the vet once. Oh, and one told me, off the back of a horrendously abusive relationship, that my ex was a delight and we should get back together. I have zero interest in having kids. I was told by a tarot reader that I love the idea of a big family and want to have many kids to spread my love. I kept nodding in agreement and she took it as confirmation and then went down that path the rest of the reading. Is stopping on railroad tracks a demonstration of terrible self-awareness? Because I see that crap all the time near my office and I just can't fathom being that moronic. That takes stupidity to an entirely new level. I'd class it as a variety of subconscious suicidal ideation. You both see the crossing signs and feel the tracks under your car. There's no way you aren't at least slightly aware of the danger. A very talkative co-worker and claimed to be very humble, generous, and prim and proper. She once asked me how my weekend was only to not let me answer and spent 20 some minutes telling me about hers, and once she was done, just walked away. She was at the age of retirement but was barely making ends meet and asking for money all the time, telling the manager she needed a reimbursements for every little thing gone wrong to her personal attire. Always talked about how her friends would tell her she could be a movie star but she was too humble to accept that lifestyle. She was divorced and she always complained how her kids were so disrespectful and ungrateful BC they never spoke to her anymore, and how they wouldn't give her any money but she would give the jacket off her back for them. I could easily add more to this list but I'll try to sum it up here. Despite her very friendly first impression, the more you listened to her the more bizarre and hypocritical it got. You realize pretty quickly to avoid her at all costs. How they wouldn't give her any money but she would give the jacket off her back for them. They're your kids, dumbass. You're supposed to know, questions asked. I have a co-worker who shares details of her Crohn's disease at every monthly sales meeting. How can someone not know that they are making an entire room full of people uncomfortable, and that in a professional setting? Personal health details shouldn't be shared, ever. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to just let everybody know I've had the worst case of the shoots after coming back from lunch. I was driving a forklift in an area open to the public. I'm basically in a narrow hallway, about as wide as my forklift is long, and have to spin the forklift around to grab the next pallet. I check my surroundings then start to spin the forklift. As I reach the point where I'm basically touching the wall with my backhand, a woman pops around the corner and decides to basically jump through the shrinking gap. Seeing movement, I immediately stop, saving her from being a smear on the wall, and tell her how close she was to being hit. She says, "Well, I wasn't hit." I told her she's welcome. Don't think she got it. Holy crap, that's a lot scarier than people realize. A guy at one of my first jobs was driving a standing forklift and didn't have one foot all the way on. Smeared his own leg against a wall exactly like that. Overheard my neighbors having an argument. The husband said, "Why do you expect me to understand why I do the things I do?" A colleague went into an explanation to me of the difference between paraplegics and quadriplegics, while I was right in front of her in my wheelchair. I am a paraplegic, lol. A girl, we called her Janet because she was so similar to Arnold's cousin on the Magic School Bus, showed up in my program at university constantly throwing out these outlandish claims about her accomplishments. I was applying to graduate schools at the time and every time I mentioned a school, not to her, ever, she would throw in, "Oh, Yale? I got in there. I'm sorry, but if you get into Yale you don't end up going to my school." She was also overweight but supposedly qualified for the Boston Marathon. She didn't run in it though, because she apparently broke her ankle so badly while hiking that the bone was sticking out, or so she told us the next day while walking on it with a tiny wrap on it and an exaggerated limp. Oh, she also had a fiance, also qualified for the Boston Marathon, but he was in med school in Michigan. She was 18. She didn't have a ring because he fake broke up with her because his buddies told him to. Somehow that was supposed to explain it. She was also the sort to start every comment in class with, "Well, I wrote a paper about this once, or at my old school it was this way," and was always asking, "Well, is there a page limit for this paper? I always write way too much, hee." Just the most obvious lies and a complete lack of awareness of how obvious and obnoxious this all was. A 47-year-old woman I know who has been morbidly obese for most of her adult life, well over 300 pounds now, criticizes her ex-husband's new wife and loves to point out, "I don't know what John sees in her. She has a big butt and big thighs." It is mind-boggling to hear this so often from her and makes me wonder exactly. Ex-friend was complaining about how she was so nice and always there for other people, but no one was there for her. In an attempt to empathize, I said, "I understand entirely. I felt the same way when." She cut me off mid-sentence to say, "No offense, but I don't have the capacity to deal with your problems." She then went on to talk about her dad blowing up babies in Vietnam. My friend bragged about how he was going to be away from home all the time to continue dating this girl from university. When I asked her how their relationship was going, she didn't even recognize his name. Former colleague, who was more than a little bit of an butt, was complaining about the process for hiring. He recounted how at the last 2 interviews before my former employers hired him, that after the executive director level interviews he was then asked to spend an afternoon with the rank and file. According to him everything was going fine, that he dazzled the executives and had solutions to all their challenges and issues. But somehow after the team met him, he was informed that there would be no offer, that the team rejected him. He was baffled. What could possibly lead the team to reject me? He asked. Our response: well, they met you, didn't they? He was an insufferable butt, and given a chance I would have rejected him too. But our leadership didn't ask. I endured almost 1 year on the same team as him. After hitting my head against conference room tables in frustration during the monthly transatlantic team meetings, he lasted maybe over 2 after that. He didn't understand why they canned him, and fought the dismissal, I bet never understanding why. In another example, he wore a historically accurate SS uniform to Liberation Days in Belgium. Didn't know why folks didn't ask for selfies with him or compliment the cosplay. He wore a historically accurate SS uniform to Liberation Days in Belgium. Please tell me someone beat him up. In a convenience store near my house, the cashier, who is also the owner of the store, sometimes starts talking with the other 40-year-old ladies who are also buying, completely ignoring other customers who only want to buy a soda or a goddamn bag of chips. That's why lots of people go to the other store instead. One of my older co-workers thinks she knows how everyone should do their job. She bitched at me one day for talking to another co-worker while working on filling a large number of orders. We work in a pharmacy. Literally the next day, during the same daily drop of orders, she and a different co-worker stopped to sing a song and dance a little jig, then spent just as much time laughing at themselves each other. Not the first or last time she told me to do or not do something and then swiftly ignore her own instructions, but this really stood out. A toxic co-worker loved to say when I have a problem with someone, I tell them to their face. That's not at all how crap went down. He talked crap about almost everyone else on the crew, as long as the person he was talking about was not present. He was completely two-faced. If you confront him, he would seem perfectly reasonable, but everyone else will never hear the end of it. I'm a manager at a corporate restaurant and there's a general manager and 2 other assistant managers like me. We work on a college campus and so all of us assistant managers are students, which is why corporate excuse this bulls, I guess. Well, my co-manager completely tormented this one employee like this was movie-worthy sexual harassment. He stalked this kid on every social media platform, was blocked on all of them, and just kept going at it. This employee got so upset with his advances one night that he left work in the middle of his shift. My co-manager ripped him a new one, telling him that he was going to be fired unless he came over to his house right that second. The employee refused, blocked him, then my co-manager found him on another social media and continued to say that he would completely forget that this happened and he could still have his job if he just answered him and came over. This went on for nearly a week and the said employee kept no call no showing. He came in one day when my co-manager wasn't working and reported this to me and my actual boss. We told him that it is difficult to terminate a manager unless he wanted to file a report. He said he just didn't want anything more to do with this and was just going to quit. It was really sad, but we understood where he was coming from. Well, during this time, there was another employee who was like 50 years old flirting with some of the younger female employees. He had also flirted with me and asked me out, so when one girl came forward it was definitely believable that he was being inappropriate. He wasn't harassing anybody, but he was making other girls uncomfortable. Literally the same day that this poor harassed boy came in and told us everything, showed us all messages, and quit, my co-manager freaked out on this one guy. We told him we were all working on it and he literally threw a filing cabinet over and said there is no gray area when it comes to sexual harassment. I am firing blank right now. And he went out and fired this guy, ripped him to shreds in front of the whole kitchen and yelled sexual harassment the whole time. This one guy wasn't harassing anyone. He was a little slow and barely ever spoke, and had asked a few younger girls to dinner. Yes, it was uncomfortable, and yes, it would have resulted in a conversation with him, but he did not do anything wrong at that point. It was just so insane to all of us that my co-manager literally fired this man for asking employees on a date the same day that this 18-year-old kid came in and told us about the torture he was putting him through. He literally said there's no gray area when it comes to sexual harassment, like frick you dude. Dude was absolutely aware of what he was doing. He wanted to deflect attention from his own harassment of the employee. My uncle has been an alcoholic for 20 plus years. Only recently he's been sober for 8 months since he finally got his card for medicinal marijuana. I have mine too, so I take him to dispensary when I go. His mother pays for all his weed because he can't be trusted with a job. Recently we went into my favorite dispensary and he didn't have enough money to buy the 2-ounce deal he was anticipating. So I overhear him from the other room admitting his alcoholism and how his mother has paid for his weed every single time he's come into the dude at the counter, hoping he would help my uncle out. It made the entire store feel weird. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.